Welcome back to Up the Villa podcast. It's our opposition preview for Aston Villa v Arsenal on Saturday. I'm delighted to be joined by Alex from The Different Knock. How are you, mate?
Mate, very well. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate
Well,
it.
I think we're both doing pretty well at the minute. So when you're talking like football terms, it's like your answer's not going to be no, is it? So, but yeah, so like we always do on these episodes, we're going to get a real big feel of how everything's going at Arsenal. So, how's the season been so far?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be an amazing game. I think I watched you guys last night against City. I was so impressed. You look, amazing. I think, obviously we've having had the Unai experience. We know what that can be, and obviously it's pitfalls as well, which maybe we can get into. But yeah, I think in terms of the intensity of how you played, in terms of how you stopped City turning, in terms of how you, just second. They were second best at everything, and credit to you. Look, I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to it. I think at the moment, we are. Where are we? We obviously had the difficult game against Luton the other night, which was concerning. To be honest, I think that was more of a tactical thing. I think we really struggled. Essentially, I won't bore everyone with Arsenal's entire game model, but essentially, normally people know obviously about Zinchenko coming inside. We didn't play Zinchenko. And what it meant was Ødegaard and Jesus got sucked back further up the pitch. And we just had no one in the final third. So every time we got there, we were just massively overloaded. We played a guy called Kivior, who I really rate, but kind of slightly struggled. But yeah, so that was, I felt it was a tactical thing, but we got bailed out by Rice. But and I'm not necessarily one to be to rely on these things because I don't really like it. The idea of title winners, or that's the sign of title winners, that you go out and do that when it's the odds are against you. I don't like winning like that. But the fact that we are winning like that is encouraging. But yeah, I think we've got a really, really tough test against you guys on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you see that point that you make about how you are winning a few games, and we've been a little bit similar. So we sort of came back against Bournemouth and we ended up drawing that game.
Yeah.
And we've come back in a couple of games like Spurs. We were poor first half. We came back to win that game. Yep. And I think over the course of a season, you have those moments and you have to have them, but you don't want to keep having them because eventually there's going to come a point where you don't get the winner or you don't get that point. So how do you feel about that? Is that a bit of a concern that that's what's happening with Arsenal?
Yeah, a little bit, to be honest. I think we've been last season. I describe it like we had this. I've got this analogy about a business. We had this brilliant business idea that was really, really working, and then one supplier fell down and everything toppled. And obviously, your ideal is to have a diverse business. You want a loads. You want to have stocks in this and that and whatever. So it doesn't really matter what actually happens. You can kind of ride the wave. And I think that's sort of what Arsenal are doing this season. We're finding different ways to play. Game to game, last season it was very, very clear. We had a very clear starting 11. We had Zinchenko come into the team for the first time, which completely changed how we build up, how we approach teams. And we kept a lot of our players fit in that first start of the season, and it really, really worked. I think we're the last team to beat you at Villa Park and stuff like that. We had an incredible season, but it fell down just at that last moment with Saliba and Tomiyasu. And I think, the impact of the problem is it goes back to blaming Rob Holding, which is it's not his fault, but he's not the player. He can't get a game for Palace. He's not the player who can get you over the line. But that proves that when one player or two players get injured, that tells you you're too flimsy. You can't, if one player falls down, what you can do is just not challenge. You've got to find a different way. So I think last summer and this season has been about finding different ways to win. One of which is, going back to what you're saying, is those late winners and, sticking to the end, and the characteristics of Arsenal under sort of late Wenger. sounds like a disease, late Wenger. The characteristics of Arsenal under late Wenger, we were a bit floppy, we were a bit flimsy, we were a little bit chaotic and would bottle things at the last minute. And it's a shame that this Arsenal team were considered bottlers, because I think from an external perspective, I understand it, but it's a shame because I think this team has a lot of character and a lot of fight, so we can go out and win games in that way. That said, it is concerning, and we've been trying to find different ways to get the attack clicking. We've faced a lot of low blocks. We've had to really grind out results. But, and the final thing is that actually our front, it's called our front six. So Saka, Jesus, Martinelli, Rice, Odegaard, and Havertz. The first time they played together was that Wolves game a couple of weeks ago. So that has been a big problem. And again, maybe from an external perspective, not something that's often considered. That they haven't been got together. We're finding different ways, but yeah, we're still in the process, even now, working out exactly how we attack.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things, the evolution of Arsenal from last season would be Declan Rice in there as well. I mean, he's absolutely sensational. He's probably one of my favourite players in the Premier League from looking at it from outside of Aston Villa. You've touched on sort of like Zinchenko going in midfield and making up that too. Tomiyasu's a bit of a big blow at the minute because he's been playing that role pretty well for you. And against Luton, it was kind of Rice in there on his own.
Yep.
So is that basically because of the injuries, or is that sort of like a different variation of how you can play?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is the thing. I think what is exciting, but also, you don't always get it right, as we didn't against Luton, is that we can play in different ways. And as you mentioned, so we've had Tomiyasu on the left, we've had Kivior on the left, we've had Zinchenko in there. We're managing Zinchenko's minutes a lot better this season. He got injured quite a lot last season. Rice can play as your pivot, he can play as your 8, he can play, either side. And also on the right hand side of defense as well, we've had a few shifts around here and there as well. So it just depends on the game and just depends what we're doing. I imagine for this Saturday, we will see. It's a possibility. I think because of how intense you guys are, and because we're away, we might start with Jorginho in there and have Rice a little bit further up the pitch to deal with those kind of more physical battles against. I'm presuming it will be Kamara, Louise, and who do you reckon?
McGinn,
yeah,
Tielemans.
Maybe. I think it's maybe Tielemans aside from an external perspective, it's quite an intense midfield. I'm expecting Rice to play, obviously. It just depends. It just depends on where you want them on the pitch. And as I say, for Arsenal, it's exciting to have all these different ways of playing and not be stuck in this kind of rigid, this is how we do it every single week. Equally, that can cause us some issues.
Yeah, and sort of without saying, I mean, obviously aspirations are to win the league, but where's the Arsenal fan base at? Like, what's a really good season?
Oh, well, I personally have said, and this is a tip for life, guys, bet against yourself because either way you win. I've said we're going to come second, but I do believe that's probably the more pertinent question. I thought City at the beginning of the season, but that's a really more pertinent question. I still think our best 11, our average age is still the second lowest in the Premier League. It's 24.4. I still feel we've got some growing to do. I still feel the squad depth, we probably just need 1 or 2 more. We were at 3 or 4 last season. We probably now need 1 or 2. It's just that final, is it a striker or is it a defender? I don't know who it is, but just 1 more to kind of deal with the demands of all 4 competitions. I think the fan base, look, I'm probably not in the majority in the sense that I think there's a lot of people who think, look, we have to win it this season or else. This project under Arteta has been going on a long time. So I completely understand those people. But for me personally, you can never make any guarantees in football. But Arteta has the club by the absolute. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but He has them by the balls. This is Mikel's club. If he wants to stay, he'll stay, and if he wants to go, he'll go. And I guarantee you, this guy's not going to leave the club until he delivers major silverware. So I'm willing to wait. And if that's, I'm not, not forever, but I do still think there is some space for us to develop to be consistently. We're asking to be competing with Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, all those clubs, and Man City and Liverpool, etc., at the top of the Premier League, and maybe you guys soon. We're asking to do that, right? But at the same time, we've probably only had 1 summer where we've been in the position to go out and get the very best players in the world. That was last summer. And even then, there was probably a few question marks over whether we could sustain it. So, we weren't in the conversation for Jude Bellingham. We aren't in the conversation for Mbappe until we can, and I think we will be, hopefully, next summer in the conversations for the very, very best players in the world. I think we're still just that margin off. I think, to answer the question, I think most fans would expect to win this season. or hope to win at least. But I still think most people, even if we came second with a good showing, would support the manager.
Yeah, so a manager that didn't have sort of complete control then at Arsenal would be Unai Emery, maybe. Whereas at Villa, he literally has got full control, brought in Monchi. We've got now a stake in his club, Real Union, and we've just built the whole thing around him now. So what was his time like at Arsenal? Because you hear, like, you know, whenever someone speaks about Villa and what's been happening, he's sort of like an Emery. It's been, he's good, but his time at Arsenal, or he's this, but. So what are your thoughts?
Well, someone pointed out to me earlier on that if a club has the word Villa in it, he'll do well. Sevilla, Villa, and Villarreal.
Definitely.
It's a good point. So maybe that was the problem. Look, first and foremost, I can't speak for Arsenal fans, but for me personally, I have so much respect for Unai Emery. I think you can have a fantastic appointment and a great manager and a great person, and it be the wrong time. It's like a relationship, isn't it? You know, sometimes you have, you know, you can meet exactly the right person. They're amazing. You're just in the wrong stage of your life, and it's just one of those things. And I think Unai had a really hard job following Arsene. I think you're right that the club wasn't set up necessarily. You know, for example, there was a famous thing for Arsenal. He wanted Zaha. We went and got Pepe. You know, he wasn't given necessarily what he wants. But it is so. And also, I will say this: I think a lot of Arsenal fans disrespected him in terms of, you know, he tried to give his first. You know, I'm trying to learn Spanish at the minute myself. It's not easy, lads. It's not easy. And he gave his first press conference in English and tried all that. And obviously, a lot of the fan base kind of mocked his accent and stuff. And yeah, I think he's a really principled, decent, good bloke, and I'm really happy to see him doing well. And I think at Villa, he's found somewhere where, personally, I think for what Unai does, I think there's a cap. I think if you look at, you know, I was just looking at your expected goals against numbers before we came on. I think Unai will always have your attack firing. There will always be something. He can always get that going. It's just a question of whether that sacrifice of control sometimes of games. There was this famous game for Arsenal where we conceded 30 goals against Watford, who were like bottom of the league. Sorry, 30 goals, 30 shots, sorry. And yeah, like that's a kind of memory that lingers long in an Arsenal mind. I love Unai. I think he's a fantastic manager. And I think he's perfect for Villa as you guys push into those slots. I think he's great for that, you know, playing Europa League football, hopefully getting you into Champions League, you know, that sort of stuff, and being given control. And yeah, it's just great to see him finding a home and a place somewhere, which is, yeah, I'm really, really glad to see it.
So what have you made of Aston Villa then, before we get into sort of like the actual game? What, from afar, what have you made of us?
Well, been really impressed. I saw a clip yesterday of Sir Alex Ferguson, first day of the season, being asked who's impressed him, and it was Villa. Yeah, I think, look, I've felt for a long time that there is clearly a massive ambition for Villa. Look, and there is everywhere. You know, there's massive ambitions everywhere. There's massive ambition at Bournemouth. There's massive ambition at Brighton. You know, everyone wants to be, you know, in the European slots. But I think there's clearly been some good business. Do you know what? I think your transfer wise, after let's maybe use Brighton and Brentford, I think Villa are in that next category in terms of how well you recruit. I think you know, I look at players like Douglas Luiz, who I would happily have at Arsenal, absolutely happily to have him, and probably would start for Arsenal. I look at players like Pau Torres. I think Pau Torres is a fantastic player. Obviously, you guys got Martinez offers, and he's doing well for you, although I don't massively love him on a personal level.
Yeah.
Ollie Watkins, I don't think there's many better finishers from the wide channels than Ollie Watkins in world football. I think he's in terms of, I mean, he's one of the only players who's ever done Saliba in that game at Villa Park, dragging him wide and shooting across the keeper. There's not many players who can do that as well. So yeah, recruitment wise, fantastic, and the decisions have been really good. And it just, you know, I don't want to be a football purist, and it's not to discredit anything that Man City or Chelsea do, but there is something so nice about a proper club feeling like it's, you know, really community oriented, and really lots of people, you know, feel like they are connected to the club in a long rooted historic way. It's nice to see a club like that doing well. So yeah, I'm really rooting for you guys. Obviously, not to come above us, but yeah, rooting for you.
So yeah, big game on Saturday. first v third, which I mean, any Villa fan going into December would think saying that at the start of the season's mental. But yeah, I mean, we're going for 15 Premier League wins in a row at home. You guys are flying. It's going to be a tough game because even because of the back of what we've just done, you know, that took probably a lot out of us. And I'm not trying to make excuses by saying, you know, we might not be as good, but how do you see the game going then in your mind? How does it pan out?
Well, I think it would be wrong of both teams not to essentially stick to their strengths. And I think for Villa, again, this is from an external perspective. I don't watch every single one of your games, only when Arsenal aren't on. It looks like your strength is you've sat a little bit further up. It feels like from previous seasons, you're trying to win the ball back very quickly, and it feels like your first thing is to go quite direct into Watkins. And I think the first half an hour of that game, you know, 5:30 under the lights, Villa Park. You know, I think it's the only game on at that time, so everyone's watching. I think it would be wrong of Emery not to say, look, first half an hour, let's absolutely go after them. You know, why not? You know, what have we got to lose? We're third. They're in our house. No one expects us to be here. It's up against his old club. You know, who hasn't got something to prove there? Memi Martinez has got something to prove. Douglas Luiz has got something to prove, having not, you know, that move not worked out. Watkins, there was interest. You know, there's so much incentive, and I think from the flip side, for Arsenal, sometimes Mikel can be a little bit too sticking to his ideas and wanting to show kind of, okay, this is how we play, this is how we play. I want us to try and adapt specifically for that first sort of half an hour, 20 minutes, because I suspect you guys will come out the blocks firing. Sometimes he wants to, you know, still play out from the back, still keep the principles or whatever. But if you guys can stop City turning in the way you did and stop them connecting inside, stop them connecting out wide. So who was your left back the other night? Just
Luca Dean.
Honestly, he just would not let. I think it was Bernardo Silva turn. Literally, whenever Bernardo Silva got the ball, straight into him, and that I think will be the message again. So I want us to, you know, try something a little bit different. I want us to try and go to Havertz long a little bit, or try, you know, just not necessarily panicking. It feels like a game where we're going to make a mistake in the build up. You're going to pounce on it. You're going to score. It's going to be 2-0 in a flash, and we're sort of climbing out the game. After that's over, I think we can begin to control the game a little bit more, and then try and suffocate you a little bit and step up. And I think at that point our quality might show. But if you can make that first 20 minutes count, I think there's a real possibility.
I think it's one of them where like anything can happen. Like I feel it's, I think there'll be quite a lot of goals. Whatever the scoreline, I can see both teams scoring. You know, I think it can possibly get quite chaotic, to be fair. So
yeah, the phrase we have is basketball match, and I do think it could turn into a basketball match if we're not careful, and I don't want it to be, because we're not very good at basketball, and you guys are.
Well, we'll end it there then. Cool. So it's been great chatting to you, Alex, and I'll put your channel all over this episode in the title, in the description, and that. So hopefully have a good season, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.